Legends, welcome to the Willie Show. Thank you for spending some time with myself and my guest today. As this is a free show, if you want to personally support the show, follow the link in the description, or to freely support it, if you watch the episodes on YouTube, YouTube will split some of the advertising profit with me, helping me out, grow the show, make it better equipment, get more places with it. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Have a great day. Sorry, a video. Cheers. That's it. I'm always ready to talk shit. Especially if it's not at the pub. But they coming through all right?
Yep.
Oh, sweet. It's always a bit weird with headphones because you'll get like your voice back through, and then like if you talk, you'll get your voice through the headphones, and you'll also hear mine.
Okay, no, I do. Yeah,
but
sound like
especially like
more, and I sound like
the amount of dogs barking in this area too, you might be like, fuck, if we didn't have headphones on.
Yeah.
My neighbours all have crazy dogs. Anyway, to get into the podcast, Chris Turner, thanks for coming on the Willie Show with me. It's been a while since I've actually done any podcasting, moving houses, whatever. But you're an ex-army combat engineer turned student turned, well, almost like officer phase of the army career. As you say, yeah. I'm the guy that walks around and people are like, what does he do?
Yeah. I get the same looks that I used to give many junior officers.
It's even better.
I'm like, oh, fuck, that's what I know. Feel like, I'm like, come on, guys.
Like, what do you actually do around this workplace? So I guess you're sort of mostly here to talk about transitioning out of defence.
Yeah, actually, the company I work for now wants to move me to Queensland, and I'm not from Adelaide. I'm a bit of an orphan in Adelaide, but you know, I've made it work for me. I've been taken in. Just sort of talk about the journey. Like, not it's a bit of a dark hole, a bit of a taboo subject, really. And I've noticed a lot of people do talk about, failures of the system. And they do have areas to improve. I do acknowledge that they are second to none on a lot of things. Like defence do a lot of good things that we draw on, we count on a lot. Like to take a bunch of knuckle draggers and then like polish them up and then they like come into this like fine, respectable unit. And that's completely subjective how you want to call them respectable.
Yeah, it depends on the unit. Huh?
Yeah,
7 RAR does not fit that description.
Yeah, they've been a bit interesting recently.
Yeah, very.
But there's actually a guy from the 7 AR that kind of started me on this path, and that was just same thing. He was I was just walking past him in the gym, and my days were numbered, and I had this idea that I wanted to revisit some of the opportunities I should have taken when I was in school. I was just too busy stuffing around. I wasn't very focused. And then I was like, I thought, going back to school and being a bit more responsible, a bit more adult about things. And then like, how do you get into uni? Like, what is this? Yeah. And just walked past this guy in the gym and then I said, oh, there's really like daunting me, like this whole concept, this like, massive pinnacle, this like pedestal that I've got to rise to. Like, how do you get in? All these smart people go there. And he's like, oh, I'm already in. It's easy as. You just do this. And it was one of the corporals I was advising on my last trip in ATF-1. And he was just so blasé about it. I was like, it's cruise out. So I was like, oh. And he's like, yeah, you could do it easy. Anyone could do it. Like, you definitely could do it. And I was like, oh, righto. Yeah, sick. And he's like, go to this website, fill out this, do that. And then he told me when I asked him, like, wow, thanks for that. Like, telling me it helped me out a lot. Just that, like, 30-second conversation.
Yeah.
And I said, who told you about that? He's like, same thing. Just a guy just told me about it. Like, pretty much walking past in the gym. And just, like, kind of just old school digging that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So I'm like, that definitely changed the trajectory that I was on. It was, like, really sort of tripping me up and how to do that. So I definitely think it's like worthwhile knowledge adding into this space that could be beneficial for your listeners or anyone else who's second order to listening to this information.
Yeah, bloody oath. And I like how you touch on the digger net of just some dude passed me in the gym was just talking about it and like that's how everything gets like disseminated now.
Yeah.
Well, it's been like that forever in the digger net. It's just like, how'd you find out about that? Oh, some dude in the gym. Most of it's bullshit.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Because the digger net's amazing, especially when you make up a rumour and then it comes back to you. Someone's telling you your rumour.
What was it? The dudes in 7, I think it was the Mortars. A lot of characters in there made up that, when they have like, they'll have like entertainment for troops over there or something.
Yeah.
Spread this rumor that Living End was coming over. And it went around for like ages. And then we're like, oh my God, Living End's coming. Like, we're like, they're coming over us. Like, we're basically celebrity status now. And then it all just came out. I'm like, no, that didn't happen. They came out like, we started that. I was like, motherfuckers.
The fuck, man.
Yeah.
I know a fair few of the Mortis guys. And was that ATF-1?
Yeah.
I know some of the Mortis guys who would have been on ATF-1.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up with them. That's funny. We had one when I was on DFSW course, but we were supporting Hamel, like ex-Hamel. And somehow the rumor came up that we were doing a live fire attack. And in the all arms call for fire, there was a US submarine that was going to fire in a Tomahawk missile, like a below surface fucking missile to come out and hit our position. We're like, that's fucking sick. So, and it got until we're on the gun line and the all arms call for fire comes in and we're like, fuck yeah, there's going to be we're all looking at the ocean, thinking we're just going to see a missile pop up. And it was just 6 mortars came in. We're like, this shit. None of you believed that, did you? Yeah, of course we believed that.
Well, what hell do you have?
We thought we're on.
Yeah.
There was even dudes Googling how much a Tomahawk missile is. It's they're firing $50 million worth of munitions.
Definitely battle hard from that. I don't blame you.
Oh man, we were so fucking disappointed. So back to your career. When did you get into defense?
Shit, I did about 8 years. I was similar to Bolts actually. When I was listening to his, I started as a chalk. Like an idiot. I like to do things twice. Did Kapuka twice.
Yeah,
I got in 2008. And then I did it for about, 3 to 6 months. I'm like, this is good. Because I had a background of playing rugby union and loved playing rugby. And then I even think I got recruited because I was at this careers expo and I was walking through my club rugby shirt on. Yeah. And dude just pointed at me, he's like, you're a rugby player? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that's pretty much the ethos of the army. You pretty much join. It's the premier sport. And you just fly around the country and play rugby. Yeah, right. Which was kind of the nature of my first 2 or 3 years up in Darwin. And just getting up to no good, dodging a lot of responsibility. It was a lot of fun. Just getting up there, going crazy with your mates. That's wicked. Yeah. Yeah. And then you were on MTF-2? MTF-2. MTF-2? Yeah. So 2010, 2011. Yeah. That was pretty full on. That was, I said, the dodging responsibility. There's I like to be objective about my experiences. So it was hard in the way that it's exposed a lot of stress on everyone. And that could be subjective to, each individual case. You could drill it down as many times as you want. And in my original one of how I was dodging responsibility, you couldn't do that. I had a very responsible job. And it was kind of got to me. I reckon I was at a nervous breakdown the first couple of weeks. And then my boss it was a second trip. And he was cool under pressure, had a great reputation. And then he pulled me aside and saw I was struggling. He's like, to be the best you can be over here, you need to acknowledge you're not going to go home. Yeah, and I thought, I'm like, well, this is kind of the seriousness of it. This is the path you have to take. This is when you can't get any more higher than this. This is definitely it. And there's now you're here, you're responsible. The best you can do is make this step for everyone else's sake. So I was like, cool. I'll But I can't remember exactly when it happened, but there was just a couple of days where I was just peaking and I wasn't really good. I was really tentative about it. I was hesitating a lot of things. And then afterward, it just went total way. I was super calm in it and I was just making the right calls. And I was just just moving through things with confidence. And then I was just calling things. And then if a device was there, I was just moving forward, doing all the SOPs properly, calling things, making the risk assessment, rendering it safe as much as I could. And just, I wouldn't say if we're doing the exact right thing by the textbook, we're doing as much as we could on the ground to make everyone safe and right by them. So, and in our battle group, I'd say the engineers had a pretty good reputation. And I definitely think that us being there and doing our job saved lives, which I, obviously take that responsibility pretty heavily and I had to live with it. And the whole experience, it took me not to shy away. If I have talent and I can see this stuff, because when I'd talk, I would when I'd find things, I'd use it as a teaching opportunity. And I'll be like, all right, cool, there's something here. I know there's something here. Or I've just seen it, or I've just identified. So you just don't behave like you found something. You just kind of move away from it and then just sort of like get the guys around who are near enough, and you're like, all right, cool guys, what do you see? What do you see coming into this position? Is anything sort of like ticking any boxes? Like guy on the hill, like rug in the tree, like pile of rocks or anything? And they'll be like, yes, no, that sort of stuff. And then you like go a bit closer. You do whatever's realm is safe. And then you're kind of like, all right, cool. Well, the device is there, and you go forward and you sort of render it, pass over to EOD. And then it gets disposed of, and you show them the photos. I'm like, this is what I found, and you show them the report. And they're like, and some of them like, I had no idea. I was literally about to walk on that. I'm like, fuck, they got you here. So you're like, no, I need to be here. I need to be doing this job. I'm like, oh, Smitty, fucking good mates with Smitty. Fucking would have just turned himself to pink mist.
Yeah. Do you miss it?
Yeah, there's definitely parts that I do miss. Again, there's like objectiveness to it. And I say this a lot. And a lot of the words that Heston Russell's been saying recently that I do agree with, that is the ethos of a soldier. So a big service before self type of ethos. And that's like has a double-edged effect. So when you're moving and you're producing things to serve others, yeah, it's highly desirable, like very popular, all these things. But if the event that you can't do that, you're consuming resources, you're the worst person ever. Because then you don't fall within the ethos. You're not giving, you're not serving, and people have to serve you. That's bad.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, is contradictory to a lot of defense policy or DVA's policies, that they said, oh, you just got to come forward and put your hand out, because you already know that to do that, you're asking for resources to be invested in you, which is against your ethos. So you're compromising your own ethos, which could, produce those mental health things. And it's very like morale crushing in a way, particularly when it's like such a heavy type of, organization you're a part of.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
What was it that finally made you up and leave?
My back gave out.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I walked until I couldn't walk anymore. I'm not sure the event, actually. It was like a couple of weeks into the thing. It could have been a fall. It could have been, just heavy squat at the gym. But I felt this kind of like residual feeling in my hip, and I thought I just pulled a muscle. And then over time, our trip got extended. It was supposed to be like 6 or 7 months, but the floods happened in towns around that time. So then it got pushed out to 9 months.
Yeah, right.
So I could have got back and got treatment earlier, but it wasn't stopping me. So I was kind of like, I got this like feeling here. And as the trip went on, it started going down the back of my leg. And it's like the classic sciatica symptoms, which I had no idea what it was or who it is. I don't know what sciatica is at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then finished the trip, and my leg was locking up the last couple of weeks I was there. I was like, oh, fuck, I don't know, what's this? Like, I'll get out of the bushy, and I'll be like, fuck, my leg keeps locking up. And I'll tell my corporal, I'm like, my leg, and he's like, stopping you? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. It's weird.
Just hurting, man.
Yeah, I don't know. And like after you start walking a bit, it'll sort of like fix itself up. I'm like, I gotta check it out when I get back. And then, I reckon a couple of weeks being back and just relaxing, just boom, just couldn't get out of bed. Just lots of pain. Yeah. And then when they looked at my leg, and my whole left leg had atrophied. So I'd been favouring my leg with not even knowing.
Yeah.
And then the doctor looked at the scans. He's like, yeah, you've done a good job. Like, this is you need surgery. And I'm like, doc, I'm a soldier again. I want to play rugby. and then he's like, oh yeah, like I've done the surgery, and like I've done front row forwards, and they go back to playing front rowers. I'm like, oh, sick, I'm good then. And I remember this like sticks in my head. I was about to like wheeled into the operation theatre, and he's like, oh, wait, I didn't tell you about the risks of the operation. I'm like, when you risk, you said you got this.
Yeah, what the fuck, man?
I'm like,
you can't tell me now. It's way too late. I've signed the form.
Yeah, I'm in like on the gurney.
Yeah, like, I'm naked under this.
Yeah. I was like, it's almost like one step more, he would have had a scalpel in his hand. And then he was like, fine. Then he's like, I was sitting in your room. You're like, yeah, nah, do this. I'm a neurosurgeon. Like, back's it like easy as like five before breakfast. And I was like, all right, well, okay, we'll tell him, like, get him out. And he's like, all right, we could just stuff it completely. Like, I could sneeze or something and just like completely sever your spinal cord. You'll never walk again. I was like, the fuck? I was like, okay, what are the chances of that? He's like, I was expecting like 1 in 1 billion or something. He's like, 1%. I was like, okay, that's kind of high.
That low.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, what are the others? And he's like, there's sort of like, could become a continent, could not get it up again. I'm like, what are the stats of that? It's like, 2 to 3%. I was like, fuck, that's still like, it's getting worse.
Yeah. Right now we're at 5%, Doc.
like, too late to pull out? He's like, no. I was like, all right, fuck, just get through it. And then he's like, yeah, like varying bowel movements, could have like lose function in your feet and like all these different things. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, all right, Doc, shut up. Like, what's the stats of me just getting this done and just going back to my life like I've never had this before? And he's like looking at like 1 to 2%. I'm like, you're good, right? You're good at this. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, no, fuck, I'm good. I told you that. I'm like, all right, good. Because if I'm in a wheelchair, I don't care if I have to roll after you or kick the shit out of you.
That's fair, man.
And I was still in go mode. Like, I was still like 2 to 3 months out of just like in this like huge crushing thing of like the pinnacle of like overseas. And you're just kind of like, I can't fucking walk.
Fuck, man. How'd you sort of go mentally with that?
Well, I was still like very like get after it. And like, it's pretty much just like slap duct tape on it, get back out there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, cool, surgery, rehab, back on. And then at that stage, my unit was kind of getting separated. They tried this experiment by sending a detachment down to Adelaide. Yeah. And they tried the engineers there. It didn't work out in the end. They sent them back. But there was a while there, the engineer squadron was down there. And pretty much in Darwin, they had this like real desert queen effect, which is like an American term where all the chicks are walking around and they think they're all like fucking really amazing because there's like just bulk dudes everywhere. Yeah. So we're like just being like, I don't know, I was like 22 at the time. I'm like, yeah, let's get down there. We'll totally pick up chicks. Yeah. Well, that was the idea. Oh no! Well, I don't know if it was spoken about the idea or was the unspoken idea.
I think that was the idea of everyone going to Adelaide.
All the boys got down here, they all got girlfriends. Yeah. Yeah. So it's amazing now. They can actually like say, oh, I'm in the army, and people don't run away the other way.
It still holds up. Yeah. Like it still does. Like I know when I was single and 19 here in Adelaide at 7RAR, that you'd go to a pub and they'd be like, I'm in the army. Oh, that's really cool. Where like all the boys in Townsville and Darwin and Brizzy and shit, because there's just so much army there. Like especially Townsville, Darwin. Like every bloke who's young who has a haircut is in the army. Yeah. That the army's not cool. Sort of like fuck off. Like 20 army dudes have fucked me over before. Yeah. I can't blame them at all. I know, like, cause you're in the rooms and that you just hear all these stories and you're like, come on, man. Like, you're like, no wonder all the chicks hate us.
Yeah. I'm like, you have a sister. I'm like, would you appreciate that? Like, yeah. Like, I get it. It's funny, but still, like, come on.
Yeah, man. That's everything with just army guys. It's just the AJ, the army jerk thing becomes, it's true.
Yeah. I get it now. Yeah. It makes it's so clear.
I know what you mean though about like getting back off a trip and just like that go mindset, because I was, say 2 months, maybe 3 months off my trip when I got diagnosed with my tumor, my brain. And I was the same thing. I'm like, all right, well, what are we doing? You're like, you got me down, cutting me open, cutting it out. And it was like, nah. And like, well, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, oh, nothing. You're like, what, cunt?
That's like, not proactive at all.
What do you mean?
Like,
and I'm like, they're like, oh, it's inoperable. Well, it is operable. You can just fucking get in there. But like, well, no. But yeah, I completely sympathize with that like go attitude. And when they were like, no, we're going more of like a watch and wait approach, not aggressive. It's like, what the fuck? Like, you don't do this. Yeah. Like if the enemy's coming towards you, the whole watch and wait, let's see what happens. It doesn't work. Like, you know.
Actually, like, that was probably some mentality I had to get out of me to do uni.
Yeah.
And I'll just this like massive tangent. Some of the interesting people that you meet. So a dude I studied civil engineering with, his dad was a virologist and he's currently working on the coronavirus vaccine.
Right.
And he's so jaded at the moment because
he's putting the 5G chip in it.
He's like, yeah, it's funny because you go, what's all these myths about that? And he'll just like shoot down super smart dude. You can't talk to him about regular everyday stuff. It's just like up in a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but high value person. One of his things before the whole COVID broke out, they were working with, because they couldn't get it on humans, but they're working on pets.
Yeah.
So when pets have a tumor, they would take the tumor and they would make like an inert version of it, and then they would sort of indoctrinate it back into the body, so the body attacks the tumor through its own immune system.
Yeah, that's immunotherapy. That's
right.
Yeah, so that's like the next thing.
Yeah.
To happen. Yeah.
Well, he was doing that on people's pets and dogs and that. So that was kind of, I suppose, the next one. Hopefully, it would be humans. And he said, oh well. Yeah, once the body's kind of adapted that, it kind of like sees the tumor as the same kind of association with that, and then just naturally goes after and takes care of it.
Yeah, well, that's what you can do, is your immune system could get rid of cancers, tumours, you know, instantly, get rid of it in a day, but it can't identify what it is.
Yeah.
So what they're trying to do is they take like the inert, and then Well, they take the bit, make it inert, and then put back into your like immune system, everything. Hey, these cells, they're bad. Attack them, and your own immune system can clear out your tumor. But that's that. It's a very hard. Like, it's not that simple because, well, there's these incredibly smart people been working on it for 30 years. But they're like, as soon as that becomes, because they're like, that is the emerging part of this, and as soon as that, like, it'll be like a bit of a like, it'll be exponential. Like, it's been tracking along so slowly, but then once there's like that, tick in the box somewhere, it'll just skyrocket. And the chemo and radio will just become like not a thing. Yeah. Because we'll use your own, like it'll never take away surgery to remove bulk of things, but yeah, it's a massive thing, man.
Yeah, well, I suppose, or maybe because his resources now on the coronavirus now, but that was what he was working on before. And when he told it, I was like, "Fuck, man, this dude never ceases to amaze." But that's just there at Flinders, and I did a few trials for them, like. Yeah, being a student, you're definitely not rolling in cash. So I did a few medical trials for them. Don't think I've grown a second head or a third nut or anything yet. So pretty good. I actually don't think I've got 6 cents, so maybe it'll be better.
Maybe it worked.
Yeah. But if they're doing human trials, I can introduce you if you like. But I'm familiar. I wouldn't say I'm familiar as I've known to experience it. But my sister had leukemia back in the day. It's funny because when I was recovering from back surgery, so we were like a real strong family of health at that stage. Yeah. She's getting around with my sister and she had like no hair and I'm like limping around with one leg.
You feel sorry for me. She's like, fuck off, man.
Oh, but she's obviously pulled through. She's in remission now.
That's awesome.
She's having her second child.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah. So, but she's like just beaming positivity, which probably goes in the line of that similar thing that you can expose. Same thing, same analogies on like material science. So you can impose stress on a material and it can either fail or it becomes hardened and like adapts and then copes. And then when you impose stress on it again, it can just deal with a lot better.
That's a good analogy, man.
Yeah, well, as I said, like I'm a bit of an idiot, so I need things dumbed right down to like learn it. And that's probably one of the tips I would give to any sort of veteran doing it is make good friends at uni. Yeah. Because you can sit next to them in the lecture room and then the lecturer's up the front, they're talking his PhD language, like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, what are they talking about? Yeah. And you're like, what's he talking about? And he'd be like, it just means this. And you're like, oh, okay. No dramas.
Sweet, yeah. You haven't had to sit down in the dirt yet and him draw a fucking shit mud model and like, okay, you're going here. Like,
well, you got to find whatever works for you. And a lot of guys that help now, I'm like, look, like I can't teach you. It's not like the army where you follow a simple, centralized, direct set of instructions. Like a lot of it is a learning experience within yourself. So I found just work rates, I did particularly well after 8 o'clock at night. Yeah, right. I'd get up early, I'd go to the gym and I'd have a nap during the day. And then when 8 o'clock at night hit, I'd have like this one desk lamp just onto my desk. And I'd just put on like this like music, whatever music I was into at the moment, like different stuff. And I would just crunch out so much work between like 8 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Jesus. And then, try to get the hit, try to get to sleep again. And then, wake up and do it all again tomorrow. But that's like 6 weeks. Like engineering is a pretty full on course. And, as an example, I wanted to like really send the difficulty scale like way down there because a lot of what was spoken to me is like, oh, you're just a digger. Like, you guys don't go to university, you guys are idiots, like all these type of things. Said more abruptly while I was in by my direct chain of command. And there's definitely some negative messages conveyed in those, for the last 12 months. And then went to DVA, they said the same thing, just more articulated. Just like, you guys are diggers. A very colonial type of perspective.
Right.
And so we're not helping you. You're on med discharge. We do have an obligation to rehabilitate you, but we think it's a failed venture if you take that direction. I was kind of like feeling very. I think I'm a large contrarian by nature, so I would just like everyone's going that way. I'll just test this way. Yeah. I'm like, fuck, I'll do it myself. And I wrote a piece on Facebook actually, and it's funny like so many people talk about it, which the feeling of being very isolated and cast out by your tribe was like definitely a crushing feeling at the time. That it was kind of like burnt out, back surgery, thrown out of this thing. And I was just at uni with a bunch of like 18-year-olds. Yeah. And I was just like this Afghan vets, like totally burnt out. And they were just like laughing about these things. And I was just like, mine was on a different planet. But as much as uncomfortable, I kind of use the uncomfortable as like, no, like I need to get used to this. Like this is something I can't just sit there and just let it define me. I need to like build on it. Like it's just a chapter in my life. It's not the whole book. So I just sort of like just tried it. And funnily enough, I think some of my extracurricular activity I did for some other money helped me with that as well. On ATF-1, one of the guys, Grunt as well, just said, we'll just say, like, what did you do before you were in the army? And he said, I did a few things. Did a bit of moonlight bouncing, did a bit of this, did a bit of that. And he goes, I tried modelling. Yeah. I'm like, oh, shit. What's that like? And he's like, oh, yeah, did some promo work, did a bit of this. Like, I think I was too short or something. Like, I wasn't getting the work turnover I expected. But, yeah, no, it's not bad, hey? Like, sometimes you get paid for some things that really you feel guilty about. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, righto. And he sort of looked at me. He's like, "You're over 6 foot." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You'd actually get a lot of money out of that." And then like my mate was next to me, who almost looks like me, who's like, "You two would make a lot of money." I was like, "This is pretty funny." All right, what are their emails, man? I'll look it up and just like send off this email, and they're like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, send us a picture of yourself. So I was like, still my cams in country. I was like, took a picture, sent to him. Like, I'm gonna see how far this goes. And then when I was discharged, I was like walking this catwalk for Maya.
That's fucking funny, man.
And then I was still the same thing because I'd tell people like I used to dig up landmines in like war zones and stuff, and they're like, "Fuck, that's so pressure." And then I'd be like, "I don't know, I feel like I'm under a lot of stress in front of a camera," and like I was like, sort of makes you look like a bit of a gronk. I was like, I find it a hard time to do with that, so I just started exposing myself to that again and again just to get very desensitized to it, and also, the community there are very sensitive about how words are spoken. Yeah. So I was quiet. I just didn't say a word for the first 6 months because I would just open my mouth one thing, just some jaded dig from like Afghan. Yeah. Just straight away, I'll just offend someone. I'm like, oh, no. Yeah. Okay. And then I'd talk to some of the guys and I'd practice just talking to people. And then I forget how I got into it. I think it was just helping out a friend of mine. And I got into like topless waitering at like hens nights. Yeah. And I'm like, after being in the army, all you do is just work out and lift heavy things. So that was like $60 an hour, and you'd do it like most weekends, and that just paid for the groceries. And then again, you had to practice walking into a compound full of strangers and not taking control by force and escalating with aggression and force and doing all these other different things. So, and then you get heckled, and you couldn't just do the AJ thing where you just totally shoot them down in flames in front of all their friends and be like, boom. Yeah. No, because then you're the idiot that just installed them all their friends. Of course, they're going to take their friend's side, no matter how much of a point you had. Yeah. So you had to like be careful about how you socialize and learn all these like different strategies.
That's like the most AJ fucking story ever. Oh yeah, I went to modeling and then I did topless waiting.
Yeah, but it's like I think it's the perception of opportunity there. So there were times where I was like, "Oh, this is shit. I don't want to do this shit." I'm like, and then I just have a genuine feel of discomfort and but then there was some part of me that was like, "No, like that feeling of discomfort is just you. That's your like thing for it." And it's just same when you start going to the gym, right? So you see these things and you do it, and the mirror doesn't tell a good story for you. Like you're like skinny or fat or whatever, and you're like, I don't look good, and I'm lifting these like little ass weights. Like, fuck, look at that dude. And that dude like has been there going for ages. So he's lifting these big ass weights, looks really good, and he can just do them all day. And then you get there, you just got to like chip away at it. Yeah. So which I think would be very indicative to a lot of things, especially like the uni one. That was about 6 years in the making. You just rock up, and there's no golden ticket or like red or blue pill. You just turn up, and I actually liked it a lot because the novelty kind of wears off after a while of like being a soldier. Yeah, it changes when you're like 16, 17, 18, where it's like super cool carrying around a soldier rifle, and then you kind of do it. And then after you've had a lot of like surgery and you had a few injuries and all these things, you're kind of like, I'm starting to get a bit tired of this. And novelty's not really there. Everything's kind of winding up, and I'm like, I don't know if I can continue doing this. Yeah. And you can just kind of feel it a little bit. It's in the back of your head. And I reckon especially when like your third year of Rosso turns over and you start counting down months, and guys like, I've got the opportunity to leave. Like, And you look around some of the like crusty sergeants and stuff, you're like, fuck, like that could be me if I stay here. Like what else is there? And I don't think we're very good at giving good options to them. A lot of the things I see is, here's an opportunity for you to serve me.
Yeah.
So whenever these incentives are rolled out, there's always just like people seeming to profiteer off that sort of transitioning demographic, which I think is a tragedy.
Yeah. So if you were transitioning again, would you do the same?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Part of it was trust in the process, and even though I didn't know where it was going, so basic training is different because you can talk to people that are out, like all your corporals and everything in there have gone out. Like me, I didn't know where that was going. I just kind of knew I was kind of good at math and physics. I had like always an interest in how things work. I like talking a bit sciencey. One thing that did annoy me about like the lunchroom discussions in the army is that to win a conversation or that kind of thing, you just have to be like the loudest.
Yeah.
Or like the guy with the biggest thing. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make it true. Like, I kind of want to know, like, substantially what is right, what is wrong. So I was always looking for that sort of transparency and things. So that was kind of my direction. And that would be my advice into things. Like, don't just copy. Like, it's not a cookie cutter thing. Like, you need to have, like, a really good think about what you're actually interested in. And there's, like, usually... And a lot of the directions a lot of people go in is a very... service before self type of things, like in medicine, paramedicine, psychology is pretty popular. For some reason, grunts like law.
Right.
Yeah. I've noticed.
Probably because they just want to be fucking right.
Yeah.
They just want to call people like pogues, but now in a court.
And then practice like all these like little tricks to go around. I thought that was interesting, like law. And there's a fair few of guys going into STEM subjects, which obviously, but they like guys think about it, which I think is good. They have experience in the world and they've picked up a bunch of skills, and then you've just like had all these epiphanies, I think, which is probably beneficial to being in the military. After you've done 3 days of sleep deprivation, things become so much clearer about what you should have done with your life.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is shit. Like my mate, like I used to sit next to, is now doing this and he's killing it. Like, why didn't I do that? That's bullshit, digging this fucking hole to fill it back in later.
Especially once you get a little bit older, because when you're like 20, 21, all your mates are just shit kickers at uni and you're like, I'm fucking killing it. I've got a car and I've got money and I go out, and then once they get out and they're engineers or lawyers or whatever, you're like, oh fuck, I'm still earning 60 grand a year.
Yeah.
I've gone nowhere, man.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's no time like the present to just like I had nothing to lose. Like I was pretty much rock bottom. I think that's like a good teaching point of being rock bottom.
Yeah.
Is that the pessimistic view is that you can't go any lower.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's start this long trip one step at a time, go forward. And I actually like ran into picked up all these really interesting people. And it's kind of funny, like one thing dies if you're like opportunistic about things or what's the opposite of pessimism? Optimist about it. Like you start meeting other people that are kind of on that same path with you, and those sort of likeness things in common pull you in that direction, and you end up making some friends. So I've got like military friends, I've got uni friends, and it's funny now I've got like student veteran friends that are kind of like in that thing. And I was fortunate in my final year that they started this real look into it. So there was a professor who was a grunt back in the 90s who like they can go to those heights. Was doing a study into it. Yeah. And part of that involved starting up a chapter of student veterans at Flinders Uni. And then like they started like a bridging course, and it was kind of like a condensed version of what I did. So instead of being like over 3 months and every Thursday, whatever, it's down to 1 month, and it's called the MAP program now. And it's an acronym for like Military Academic Pathway Program. And it's just for guys to go and like test it out, which a lot of guys take it up. There's like an 80% take up, which is similar to the stats in America. And then about 20% don't, which I think is also rewarding. Yeah. Because then you realize that you don't want to do that. That's like that ticked. It's an experience, and yeah, tried it, done it, whatever. And then that map course offers direction into just entry into the university, and then you can do that. Where it's lacking, where the bottleneck is kind of financial assistance in just not in the way of tuition fees. It's in the way of just having a roof over your head and food on the table, like basic survival things. So a lot of guys going through now are doing it really tough and doing similar things to me, where I had to donate a lot of lunchtime to get a sandwich.
You saved 4 lives as well. Whatever they say with giving blood,
obviously that, and I felt a bit bad, and I sort of wanted to like pay back a bit after my all my sister's chemo treatments. So it ticked a few boxes. So yeah, I did that, and just made ends meet. But the opportunity that I had at the end of the year was I found myself in a position where they said, "Oh, we're doing this higher education for veterans study," and part of it involved starting this chapter, and I was at this sort of drinks event where they're getting all the student veterans together at uni, and I was talking to them, and I was sort of like going around the table a little bit, and the way they're sort of conducting themselves, you can kind of tell there's like, and a lot of people get like a bit touchy about this, and I tell them like the psychology between the different branches and the corps is kind of different. And some are like, no, it's not. A veteran's a veteran. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, no. I'm like, believe it or not, there is kind of like a loose hierarchy. There's all these different things. There's bragging, like, and it's all part of the game. I'm like, it's just that. Like, sometimes I look back at myself, I'm like, why didn't I get a trade? I'm like leaving this thing just with a busted knee and a broken back. I'm like, I wasn't too smart about it, so I had to like start square one again. And then some of my other mates who were in the Ramey Corps went off and got trades and be like, that was pretty cool. And they're like, nah, man, you got to do this. I'm like, yeah, I almost blew myself up a few times. That didn't feel too cool at the time. And like now I, cold weather comes and I'm a bit slower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that doesn't feel too cool. How was I going with that?
You're talking about hierarchies in like a drinks event. You can see like,
yeah, and then when I like got in a bit further, they all seem to have this like positive reflection on defense. I'm like, which is good. You can have that. And then I was asking them like, okay, cool. Well, why are you studying at uni? And they're like, I'm on DAS. I'm like, it's wicked. And the majority of them were from the Air Force. So the Air Force is a bit of a different beast in that regard, which is like great for them. They can access that and have a positive reflection upon their experience in defense. But my point is that the disadvantaged people of defense probably don't have a positive reflection on it. And there's so many guys, my last memory of them was like, they were killing it. Like you could ask them to do anything, which is like go to Afghanistan and like solve this problem. And you wouldn't ask anyone else in Australia. That's why they're there doing that. And then they come back and for some reason or another, they're just having a difficult time. I'm like, I don't think we should be dedicating our resources towards the demographic. They're here and they're doing it already, which is kind of good. So they're on top of it. If anything, we need to be dedicating things towards this demographic. And I'll probably say like the combat corps, because all you've done and you kind of just like barked at in such a way to get you to do that job well. And you can't just wear it. You just cop on the chin and you wear it. They're like, yep, no, you're a grunt. Like you carry heavy shit and you get yelled at. And you're like, sick. Like whatever, boys. So like, we're doing this together. Let's get through it. But then like it kind of works against you when you're like, all right, well, what else can I do? And they sort of like just fly right over the things that like, all this like leadership, like making things like they get up and make it to win attitude. There's some things that I really miss, like being in the workforce again, is that people didn't have this sort of this punctuality or respect about themselves. And there's been a few times where I've been like just biting my tongue. And I've been like, I used to be part of this group where you would get absolutely crucified for doing this.
Yeah.
I was at a graduate event recently and all the grads got in and they just went out in the town afterwards and it was a Tuesday night and nothing was going on Tuesday night. I'm like, guys, you got to know when to peak. And like Tuesday night, nothing's happening, COVID. I'm like, it's a 2 or 3 day event. So I'm like, State of Origin's tomorrow night. Like, let's make that a night. And they couldn't because they went out on Tuesday night. And they just spent themselves. And then the Wednesday morning, they all just couldn't turn up to work. They were just like hungover, turning up in like this ragtag clothes. They said, come in your company uniform. We want to get a photo. Be here at this time. Couldn't turn it. And they just looked like a bag of shit, really.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there like ready to go, have my like book with me. And I was like looking around and the boss was like, all right, I guess I got to take everyone down to the coffee shop to get everyone sobered up to go do this. So we started the day 2 hours late. I was like, wow, I was just imagining what would happen if like this was pulled, like back in uniform, like you like. It'd be like everyone restricted for just for like 3 months.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, you would not, it'd be the worst ever. Even if like 20% of the guys went and did that.
Yeah.
And that would be like the biggest. I'd be like, yeah, you just wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it.
No, well, that's the whole, you have to be able to do a BFA shit face. Yeah. like if you can't do the basic drunk, you're not fit enough, or like if it's at 7, you're there.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, yeah.
And if you couldn't do it, then you don't do it. You have to be like really responsible. And a lot of the staff at the MAP are university staff, and they almost get teared up really when the soldiers are there and they said, oh, you know, they're there and they're full of trepidation. They're like, they're on their first day, I'm like, don't know what I'm doing here. Everyone told me not to come. All these things. And then I talked to them again at the end, and they're kind of like, I'm more confident now. I think I can do it. But they just sort of let a bit out while they're there to the staff. They're like, you know, I was told as an idiot I shouldn't be here, all this kind of stuff. And the staff take it really personally. Like, what do you mean? And they tell me, like, why do they think this? I'm like, they are the most, like, they're the most handled students I've ever taught. I'm like, they do this. They're the only class I've ever taught. Everyone does all the readings. Yeah, yeah. And they answer all the questions. They're like, I've never seen it before. They're like, they're the best class to teach. Yeah. And they just perform everything. And then when they don't understand, they come and engage with me. The thing, I'm like, even the ones that don't and are not interested in doing it, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Thanks very much. And they're like, they smashed it. They were awesome at it. And they're like, you know, it's just not for me. I'm like, as a student, they're like the best equipped to do like future courses. I'm like, highly recommended. Yeah. Anyone you want to send here, I'm like, they're such a pleasure to teach. Love them. I'm like, and they'll go on and do it. I'm like, even the ones that aren't academically gifted, they can engage support services and they get through it, and they all sort of bond together and teach each other. I'm like, and I'm like, who are these guys? I'm like, that's them. That's instilled into them. That's why they do well. Yeah. And they're kind of like, I want to teach more classes. So the MAP happens like every semester, like twice a year, and they put about anywhere from 15 to 30 guys through at a time. And a lot of the time they're like, I heard it from a mate, or this like really disconnected sort of communication. And I know like sometimes the military tries to like shut those sort of communication channels down because they don't want the guys to leave. So any sort of valuable opportunity outside, they kind of like shut it down, which I don't really believe in. I'm like, as part of doing it, I think it was a worthwhile reflection on defense itself to take an opportunity to be like, all right, we're not doing great. Like, we need improvement in this aspect. Why is our talent leaving? These guys are leaving and they're becoming, you know, great entrepreneurs, or they're doing this or doing that. Why didn't we see that academic potential within them and then keep them in the service? Which I think is detrimental to the organisation, which I do believe in the organisation. I think it's become a bit sort of like I don't know, what do you call it? Tainted in some ways. Yeah. Yeah. There's some elements of that. But which is like, it's sad to say, it's sort of like it's some of its reputation getting dragged through the mud. And I had a difficult time towards the end. But
it's a hard one with it. I think if you're outside of looking in, or you're speaking to guys who are jaded, it taints it a lot. But you can speak to really positive guys who are in and like, yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's a hard one because a lot of what you see, like, you don't tend to post a lot of like really positive stuff or speak about a lot of it, but you'll talk about the bad stuff a lot more. Like if I go to the pub with the boys, we speak about more when things went wrong or when something was really shit, rather than, I remember when that happened. It just doesn't interest us. So I guess it almost breeds that, almost an outside looking in, it would be like, oh, it must be really fucking shit. But it's like, yeah, but there's 20 of us at the pub who all lived that experience in Tully or whatever, and it was fan. Like, it's like one of our most fond memories, although it was shit. Yeah, it's a weird one.
I heard I listened to Jocko, and I've read some of his books. Jocko Willink. Yeah. He was asked one of these questions, and they were like, "What about the suck? All these different types of stuff." And he's like, "My opinion of the suck is good." I'm like, because he said, just as you say. I'm like, how many times the people with the tightest knit things are people who have gone through suck the most? Yeah. And I'm like, so if you have these bad situations, I'm like, get ready. I'm like, you're about to either grow as a person and become a tighter unit. Yeah. And you'll pull through it. There's always like the next day, which I've had sucking moments in every different thing. Like, I've had good projects at uni, had bad projects at uni, and then now I'm kind of through it. Same in the military, had good commanders, had bad commanders, had good missions, had bad missions, And yeah, as you say, I like remember that, and you just kind of just talk about, you know, when someone stuffed up, when things went south, and then how you all kind of pulled through it, and like someone pulled you out of the weeds, and just kind of like the grit that you had to have that you called upon. And it's just funny because you're like, I didn't even know I had that. That was there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, it exists, and it just pushes that envelope a little bit further.
Yeah.
It's like, but Jocko is one of those ones, like, I love Jocko, but I'm like, fuck, man, you're so tough. Like, you listen to his shit, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not that tough, man. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, good dude, man. You mentioned before that, like, you sort of sat down in your first, like, lecture, and everyone there's, like, 18, 19 years old, and you're this crusty ex-fucking digger engineer. But did you find that you're, like, actually having that 8 years life experience or whatever it was at the time excelled you past some of the academic
Yes.
routines? Or although you may be behind academically because they've just done physics in year 12 and out, but did you find you went forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to explain to some of the student veterans, like, your ability to see the forest or the trees is just, like, beyond what, and then part of it is being like in the army as well, is because that you know they'll do stupid stuff like who wants a motorbike course, all these stupid like dangling of carrot techniques, all this kind of stuff. So it's like the school of hard knocks that you went through, and then you're in this like, you know, polished academia, but because you were kind of educated in this other world, and then you get thrown in this one, you're kind of like, I see what's going on here. And I have like all these different sort of tips and tricks that you can like kind of get away, and we sort of like share them a bit in our Facebook page. One of them was, I said I was uncomfortable in an exam condition. I'm like, if I'm sitting still for 3 hours, it may cause me some discomfort if I'm having a bad day. And like, oh, we actually got like there's like, you know, people with disabilities and that all go to university. And like, we got like some support plan around, I forget what they call, like academic support plan or something. Like, can you bring some medical files in to, you know, justify your course? I'm like, got it.
Yeah.
Just reading in front of my service doctors, like, boof, like phone book of China, like, boof on their desk. And they're like, and they started looking at all like the letterheads and everything, like all these defense and like, yeah, surgery. So they're like, Jesus Christ. And they're like, they pretty much gave me my own room, rolled out like this armchair recliner to do it in. It gave me like an extra 20 minutes per hour. So I was having like 4 hours to do an exam, a 3-hour exam.
Right.
And then, yeah, so definitely helped my GPA. And, yeah, some things like, and all like my mates at uni used to hang shit and they go, you got to do this in 4 hours. I'm like, man, you're more than welcome to like join the service, go and fuck your back up, like go do all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll give you this. Yeah. Yeah, because I guess that sort of goes into that whole idea of like A grade students end up working for the C grade students. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You see it all come out, and you see like, because the lecturers, they kind of go through uni and then they kind of like work in a little bit of it and they just upskill academically. So they kind of only know uni. They do this like really sort of like all their techniques feel very like amateurish to get students to do stuff. And you're going like, I see what's going on here. He wants to see us do this. So you pretty much just go up there and like, we're doing this because of this. And you see him much like, tick, done, 100% did that objective. And you're like, and someone's just going to ask him like, what do you want to see? And you see him getting a bit sassy with some of the younger students because they like come out of school, and you just walk up to them, just like square up to them, and be like, "What is this? I don't understand what you're talking about." And just like just peg them down.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, well, this is for this learning outcome. That's for that learning outcome. If you can demonstrate this, then you'll get this. And you're like, all right, cool. Well, this is what I was thinking. How's that? Like, oh, just modify that to do this. And then you can bring it to them as many times as you want. Sometimes they're a bit busy, but a lot of times you kind of just do that sort of a bit more mature approach. And you kind of just come up and just call a spade, and you really, that's what I used to do. It's just give them like, I don't understand. And then you kind of fully aware that your fees are paying their wage. So you got to teach me this shit. And I'm like, I don't know. Otherwise, you just give them like this super bad review at the end, and you just sort of complain to the course coordinator, whatever. So there's like methodologies to encourage them to do it. But you're kind of aware of these mechanisms and how to make them work for you, and aware of the whole things where some of the other students were just kind of lying down and copying them, not that like they're not doing their due diligence. I'm like, you can go and ask that, you can like leave on that, and you got to kind of teach them a bit to be a bit more adulty, a bit more this, and not to be so nerdy and a bit more cool about stuff. Yeah. So there's like a mutual exchange of values, but I was definitely leaning on them because I saw them as like, all right, these guys just finished like their 12 years of schooling, so they're good at like taking in content and passing tests and like interpreting content in a book. So I definitely need to brush up on that. So I spent a lot of time just like sitting next to them, and every different one of them, similar to a soldier, would have certain strengths in what they do. Like one guy was like a math whiz, so but liked to work alone, whereas another guy had a good work ethic. So I'd get together with that dude and we'd just like crunch out like lots and lots of things just to like get it embedded in us. Then we'd go back to that dude and be like, all right, cool, here's what we did. And we made a mistake once or twice here. Like, how do you do this? Like, teach us how we went wrong. And he'd be like, yep, the X, Y, Z, bang. And then you just went back and forth from that. Another guy was very articulate in his report writing, used to, always score very high in his report writing. So I'd be like watching him write and like writing next to him. So, which every student I talk to, usually once they get to the first year, they're like, and they're pretty much just like exponential from there.
Yeah.
Like, the thresholds around those the map course and the first semester, second semester, once the first semester like dropped, and they usually do quite well because they overcompensate. They're like, fuck, I had to work really hard to do this. And they're like, bang, like you got like a distinction.
Yeah.
I was like, that's good, right? I'm like, man, that's only one under the top one. And you're like, fuck yeah. Like, I'm not a dumbass. Like,
oh my God, what the fuck?
Like, fucking Sarge told me, and Sarge is never wrong. I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah,
like,
Sarge is my dad.
Yeah.
What would your advice be? And I know this might be a weird one, but as far as a lot of people like myself who are outsiders looking into university, and especially from like a grunt background, they're just like, uni is just politic bullshit central. Like, I don't want any part of all that system. Because you see a lot of this, far wing politics coming out of universities. Even at like a recent event I was at, that is a defence event.
Yeah, I saw that one. I saw that video of yours.
Yeah, was university fronted. I didn't really go into it too much on that, but one of the universities had a lot to do with everything happening there. What's like your advice to guys sort of looking into that community?
Right. So that's why we do have that chapter to provide that sort of like shoulder where same thing happens when I see the guys walking around O Week, where they stand there just to try and catch the guys when they walk around. And even like their response to us being there, and we'll do something stupid, like we'll have a hoochie over our thing. So they'll come past and laugh at us and be like, oh, we know that. Like, we know why you're laughing at us.
Fucking
Like,
lids.
yeah, you're in. You're in now. We know you're an AJ. Come in. Whereas some guys are like, oh, I like World of Warcraft. I'm like, no.
No.
They'll go around like stir up all the Marxist stands and things like that, which is pretty funny. And I had an incident like that first, like day one, week one, O Week, walk past some like blue head chick in the courtyard preaching about refugees.
Yeah.
And I was like, said to this guy on O Week, I'm like, I'm going to wipe this chick up. This would be funny ads. And then she like tried to hand me these pamphlets and newspapers and all this sort of stuff. And I just looked at her, I'm like, why would I take that? I hate refugees. And she just like blew up at me, like came at me like super aggressive. And I was about to be like, I could see myself on the scene of 21 Jump Street where Channing Tatum like knocked that like black dude in the car park.
Yeah.
And like that was me. She came at me aggressive and I was still like wound up from just leaving. And she like got up in my face. I was about to like take a step back and like left hook this chick and just lay her out in the courtyard in front of everyone. And then they'll be like, bang, that's it. Day one, week one. I couldn't even get through. I just like punched out some blue head chick in the courtyard. But I like snapped out like right then. I'm like, all right, cool. That different sense of humor.
Yeah.
Like can't like sort of do that. And I was pretty lucky being in engineering. Like the politics doesn't get too much into it there. But to be objective about it, I would say the defence and veteran culture is kind of extreme in its own right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So it kind of like takes you out and maybe resets you back on that fence. So the only way to meet an extreme one way is maybe to be extreme in another way. And then they will expose point of views on you and you'll be like, fuck, actually, that's a fair point. But then you'll be able to like call shit out on them because you'll probably be in the minority. And we do offer that chapter there because at the end of our end of semester event, we pretty much get out there and just like laugh about all these things and how hilarious they are. And I've had a few stories where the lecturer's been up there preaching about this stuff. And this dude just jumped on the lecture and just started like chest poking this lecturer in the middle. Just like, and then he kind of like just realized what he was doing. He's like, oh crap. He's like, oh sorry, I'm a veteran later. And he got white gloved out and it was pretty funny, but I'm like, you don't want to use that too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he said next time he came in, she had a totally different tune. And there's actually a study done by Syracuse University, and I mean to get to this sooner. America kind of like light years ahead of us in the form of higher education. So when I said 80% of veterans. That's a stat taken from them, which I say this map course is kind of following along the same stats. And I would say we're more similar to differences with that veteran demographic. So I had the opportunity to go over to their national convention, national conference in January 2020, like before the whole thing came crashing
right
down.
before everything came down. Yeah.
So it was a great opportunity. So the university said, we're doing this thing and we see what, and then we heard America's doing this stuff, go to their national conference and see what they're doing. And I like slipped straight into their thing straight away.
Yeah.
And, like all their behavior, they had different terminology. That was about it. But their mannerisms, the way they conduct themselves, all this sort of stuff. And they invited me back to, this group of students invited me back to their campus in Hawaii.
Yeah,
and spent a few days there to check out that campus.
Yeah, check out, have a couple of beers and
yeah, you get it.
Check it out.
I literally just drove around the ring road and I'm like, yeah, that's it, sick. Let's go get
that's cool. See you, man.
Yeah.
That was just like my Rockall trip through Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, so I had to like talk about it when I got back. It was a bit like, so what was University of Hawaii like? I'm like, good.
Sick.
They had like good weather and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they said they had the same thing. Like, it is an extreme, but you will learn coping strategies and different types of things. Sometimes it just means like biting your tongue. Sometimes it means like once you sort of get the skills up to articulate arguments well, you can go and then you can make arguments that are substantial and adding value to the space. Because if everyone's just one way, they're not getting any value. There's no criticism there at all.
Yeah.
So that was actually identified in this study done by Syracuse University in America, is that veterans have a diverse background and can enrich the learning space because of their experience. So it's a second order effect of their experience, like pushing onto the student body.
Yeah.
And it's a funny story with them actually. So the history of their higher education thing started with the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a guess of when the GI Bill started.
Oh, fuck knows. Like the 60s? I thought it had been around forever in the States.
Yeah, 1944.
Yeah, right.
So they had this policy in their government since 1944. And a lot of people think it's just defence to pay. Like that's the mechanics, just defence pays this. And you know what the boys would do if it was defence to pay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they'd just piss up the wall and just waste their money. But it's more like a super scheme. So we invest money during our career for when we retire and transition to retirement. So the GI Bill is just kind of build up, and part of their wage gets siphoned off into a fund, GI Bill fund, and then the defence contributes into that. And then when they transition, they get those sort of like life essential critical things like roof over your head and food on the table type of stuff for like 3 or 4 years while they sort of upskill and transition to a worthwhile thing. And it actually starts good dialogue where you're in too, because all the guys know they got it and it's coming and it's there. So they all start talking about it. And a lot of people they're the first generation university in their family. So defence actually use it as a recruiting tool. They said, can you afford to go to uni? He's like, no, I'm from, some hick family in the South. Like no one goes to university. And he's like, all right, cool. Well, they have a good reputation for the military. So like go and serve your country. And then they'll talk to other guys like, yeah, I'm going to do this with my GI Bill. And then they'll be like, yeah, Jonesy went there as well. He done that. He's this now. Yeah. And they're like, oh shit. Like me and Jonesy, I used to smash Jonesy at everything. Like, of course I'm going to go there and like do this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so fucking nice.
Eventually, heaps of guys actually get themselves out of poverty or that sort of like downward spiral by serving in the military, then using the GI Bill. And then they go back and they sort of have this alternate perspective that maybe their family wouldn't have like put them in that direction. Yeah. And it's just all through that sort of thing. And everyone also says, everyone's very dismissive when I talk about this. A lot of like public servants and occupational therapists and people, like lots of experience in the military to shoot it down. Yeah. Every time I speak about it in these sort of like forums, everyone's like, oh, we're not like America. I'm like, trust me, I've been with the American veterans and we're more like it than you'd like to admit. Oh, shit, yeah. And they're like, oh, they're bigger. I'm like, it's scalable. There's a reason they call them the 1%ers, is because 1% of their population serve in the military, same as Australia. And that's 1 in 100 people. Like, it's completely scalable. And their contributions are their own. So they've contributed to their own sort of thing over this, which is what I like about it. I'm like, it's going to keep them honest, going to keep like the thing. And if they don't use it, then there's still a surplus that could maybe be used in some other way. yeah, so I'm kind of a fan of it, and I recognise that's a bottleneck in that type of financing. And the thing I also like is it gives you like that psychological decompression time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it probably took me a good 2 or 3 years to like just properly decompress and get it. So yeah, I definitely couldn't do what I'm doing now overnight. Like I did, yeah, it's a couple of years, and I kind of like my time at uni. And I kind of went off the radar on the veteran thing, veteran world a little bit. I'm kind of like reconnecting now, just because it felt like that betrayal was there.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, yeah, you mid discharge, you're dead to us, Linger, like get the hell out of here, good for nothing, like whatever uni, like what a harebrained thing, you're just gonna be a loser for the rest of your life, catch you later. So I was kind of, yeah, those kind of words actually kind of egged me on to do it. I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, watch this. I'm gonna do this. Yeah.
Fucking A.
Yeah, and just like dug my heels in and just like started like one thing after another. And then everyone's like, no one wants to be friends with you. I'm like, good, that I have no distractions.
Yeah.
And was just completely optimistic about every single process and just push forward, just determination and grit, just like moved it forward. And part of it that did it is that I always knew there was someone worse than me. And that was probably when I remember back to Afghan. Is everyone's like, when you hear these bad stories, I'm like, there's always someone that's like way worse. And there's this, one of them I actually met in uni, a dude doing civil engineering. I was just showing some photos to guys at like when we're having drinks after the semester. And someone says, oh, this sounds like all the stuff that this guy used to do at uni. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll point him out next time. So when we're in a lecture, he's like, that's him there, Afghani looking dude. And I went up to him, like spoke some Afghani to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, how'd you learn these words? And then, yeah, he was an interpreter for us over there. And then I helped them get a job. One of the boys helped them get a job in Woolworths, and I helped them get a job for a defence contractor.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah, and then he's out now. He's like civil engineer.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm like, whenever I'm sort of like having a gripe about, oh man, I'm doing engineering, no one understands, like all these having a whinge. I'm like, this dude taught himself English, like worked for us for like 10 years, like lucky to survive, and then was lucky enough to get immigrated to Australia, got his family over as well because he worked with us, and just like rolled with it, and then got into university. I'm not sure how he got into university, but I just ran into him once. I was like, fuck, bro. And then he was just working. He was like stacking shelves at night.
Yeah.
And he had a young family and he was doing civil engineering. So I'm like, I'm just going to shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just here chilling.
Yeah,
Donating blood every couple of days.
Yeah. So I was getting like, I don't know, my med discharge pay, and then, which definitely helped. That's why I'm a big advocate for those, that base level finance. And sort of by myself, just taking care of it. And he's got all his other things on his plate. I was like, and he's like, oh man, I was like, fuck, I'm so jaded right now. I got all this stuff going on. I'm like, how about you? And he just like belt feeds all this stuff. And he's like, oh no, actually I'm good. Like, I don't even remember that stuff. Like, just forget about it.
Yeah, I'm good, man.
Yeah. Oh, good. You need help? Like, I'll help you.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
I'll come stack some shelves. I'll come to Woolies.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm like, bro, don't fucking stack shelves, man. You get paid way more to like learn your trade in this type of organization. And it was like an undergrad role I did. So every summer I'll get an undergrad role in some form of what engineering is. And I just, yeah, it wasn't for me. It was this. I'm like, this, like, I know some guys there, just got him a role. I'm like, this guy's got defense experience, you know, bilingual, all this sort of stuff, got him a job there. Wasn't for me. He's still working there today. Yeah. Happy with it, but I'm like, now he's like sort of broken in, and he's civil engineer, former interpreter for Australia.
Fuck. Did you find once you graduated uni and you went, I guess looking for a job, that your defense background played a big part in like getting selected, recruited into a
I would say it was detrimental more than anything.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's the theme at the moment, being like white straight guy, you're responsible for all the world's problems. But that was kind of large, like being that graduate, being in that sort of academic space, it was coming out a little bit, but it felt like it was against me, but I couldn't exactly say why. And then I was in one interview and they said, they said, like, your resume is much different to a lot of other people. I'm like, yeah, well, I used to be in the military. I suppose I've done a lot of things that a lot of your other graduates haven't. And I said, that's good, right? And I said, well, it's just like, we don't know where to put you. I'm like, we know how to manage graduates and that demographic. I'm like, we don't know anything about you or your demographic. I'm like, well, well, you know about the military, right? Like, what do you think of the military? I'm like, oh, they do a fantastic job. I'm like, it's just when they are a veteran. I'm like, well, they're still good. Like, they're still very similar. I'm just as much as that person today, except probably I can't pack as much.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, we wouldn't know how to manage it. And the only thing we know about the veteran demographic is you guys have mental health conditions.
That's fucking sad to hear, man. That sucks.
Like, and that's how he broke it to me. I was kind of like, and he was only like 23 or 24 himself. I was like, I'm good, man. Thanks very much. But like, bring me a graduate and I'll probably smoke the shit out of him. Yeah. And it is like, I'd love to, but you know, I can't justify taking the risk to my employer because they're like HR and they need to like go, look, we've recruited these people for your company. Here's the thing. So if you like sort of flip out, they're like, why the hell do you recruit him? We know nothing about backgrounds in that demographic. Like, why'd you take? Whereas if they recruit graduates, they're like, look, we know 8 of these, probably 2 of them are going to drop out. And it's like substantial, and they can like date that back to statistics from wherever. So it's an acceptable level of risk. Yeah. And they don't want to get wound up in that. I was like, fuck. I was like, well, maybe that's all like things like when I submitted, everyone was like, which is red flag. I'm like, fuck, guys, that's so disappointing. But again, that's like the reactivity of the system. In order to get treatment, you got to like really sort of make that noise. So as a second order effect, the system's actually creating like loud victims of the situation, which is not great. No, not at all. That's why, I kind of like this thing where guys are being proactive and they're getting after it, and it's not exactly written on your piece of paper at the end that this person is like bachelor and whatever. You kind of now I always have like 2 modes. So when I talk to like Anzac Day, I'll be just like back in the day
dig mode,
dig mode, and then when I'm sort of in the corporate office, I can like engage corporate life and engage that type of stuff, but then also have like a fundamental understanding of what like a coalface worker is experiencing and give that sort of point of view. But I can articulate and control that situation in that space, which I think it requires a range of skills, but you have to sort of like accumulate them over time just by being in that space and just sort of giving it the opportunity. And I wouldn't say it's not me. I'm like, it's not me. It's not universal to me. The fact that Americans are doing it, and if you've ever worked with America, to say that they're more academically gifted than the Australian digger is a bit of a slap in the face, really. Yeah. But the policies are kind of saying that. Yeah, because when you bring it up, like, why do we do what they're doing? They're like, oh yeah, we're not like them. Like, our guys couldn't do that. All these kind of things. I'm like, have you worked with these guys? Like, have you seen them?
I've worked with the Marines and it's fucked.
Yeah. And then,
like, shit.
So that's what I mean. Yeah, I can tell you that when you're like, gotcha, good point.
Yeah, bro. We got in this thing with the Marines and they were shooting at us while yelling blue on blue. I'm like, just stop fucking shooting and it'll end the blue on blue.
Yeah, win the blue on blue fight. That's not a thing. Like,
they were bounding. What the fuck? Yeah. Yanks, man. But yeah, I know what you mean, fully.
But we actually have a guy who's a Yank in part of our chapter. Yeah. And he's on the GI Bill. And then he's like in amazement. He's like, you guys don't get help? I'm like, you guys don't have this? I'm like, how are you guys studying? And the guy's just like dressed in rags, like, we're getting through, man. Like,
eating the goreng and...
Yeah, we're doing this. Yeah, pretty much like anything to make ends meet. And they got his like side hustles where, one guy's like a security guard and just sort of always takes night shift and just does all his uni work on night shift and then just sleeps during the day.
Fuck, man.
Yeah, so everyone's kind of like, now it kind of feels like everyone's kind of like looking at each other. Like even the veteran community themselves. I get told there's guys that are kind of watching from the sidelines, but a lot of the ESOs and their sort of non-deliverables have made them a bit hesitant to trust again. So we've kind of like caught in that. I'm like, well, no, we're not like that. We're not that at all. We're pretty much just like a bunch of dudes, like trying to represent the cause better. I'm like, there's no way we would do things to try and benefit ourselves because we are you.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we go on and sort of talk to industry or something else I meant to give you.
Oh, what have I got now?
Well, that's one of our...
coin.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. I'm a bit of a collector of these as well.
Just one of our supporters, like industry or things.
That's awesome, bro. Thanks for that. Sitting on your fucking ass all day.
Yeah, I just get it warm for you.
So, fucking oath. So what are you doing with yourself now, work-wise?
I got a go with a mining contractor.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not sure if they're aware of this, but mining is my passion. I did it because it pays the bills well. So getting an income's like new again. So sort of working out that, I don't have to like, you know, make ends meet, like using a rope as my belt anymore.
Yeah.
I wanted to pursue what I wrote my thesis on, and it's like a really, really convoluted thing. It taps all the things of a lot of problems I've spoken about today, like energy usage, water usage, thermal comfort in houses, housing affordability, waste. If you Google Earthships, it's them, but they're very, how would you say, unrefined in their construction model. So probably being in the Army engineers, you kind of get very good at being efficient with how you make stuff with a limited amount of resources, and then how you sort of drill the guys and assemble things. So I believe using that sort of branch of that history and the academia of what I've learned to how to analyze things, and the kind of the methods and models and what they use already, I can kind of optimize it to produce a competitive product with the domestic housing model.
Yeah, right. So what are they actually digging up? Like,
they're not digging up anything. So
yeah, right.
It's very hard to describe without pictures. So it's
that's all right.
It's very simple things like, so to reduce volatility and temperature, the classic thing with this is to reduce any sort of volatility storage.
Yeah.
So at the moment they're talking about electricity volatility with with the grid. So they're trying to do batteries.
Yeah.
Or some kind of storage. With thermal volatility, you can do like thermal capacity. So what they do, instead of having like plaster walls, timber, and then just like over engineer it with lots of insulation, they non-equatorial side of the house is a lot of earth. So like earth ram walls, and they sort of compound that in a brick-like structure using car tires.
Yeah, right.
So they're earth ram car tire walls, they call them. And then you're sort of reusing old car tires in your thing, and it's this really heavy wall, and then they sort of do an earthen render over it, which is probably, if you've been to Afghanistan, you would have seen those earthen rendered walls. And from what I told of Cav, they were stopping some of their rounds.
Yeah,
so
just stop 84s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're pretty integral walls, structural wise. And then on the equatorial side of the wall, that's where all the glazing is. So the significance of that is the movements of the sun. So when you want it warmer, which would be in winter, the sun's taking a lower arc. So you can get a larger solar gain by having your windows in there. So it's a self-balancing system with the building to have the glazing on that side. And it sort of like, it's built east to west. And depending what same hemisphere you're on, depends on what side your thermal storage is and your glazing.
Yeah.
So just that simple construction idea and a grander vision of what's going on makes this whole building sit between 20 and 24 degrees all year round.
Yeah, right.
Which is nice. It's nice wherever you are. So if you're cold and you walk into a 20-degree house, you're like, yeah, it's pretty warm. I like this. And then if you're coming from peak of summer and you walk into it and it's 24 degrees, you're like, this is really refreshing.
Yeah, you go from 45 to 24. It's a massive drop.
So as humans, that's what we like. We like nice balanced temperatures. We don't like these hectic, volatile temperatures. That's what we look. And also the water usage. So they tout they use water 4 times, whereas most buildings just use it once. So they capture their grey water, and this is a bit I wrote my thesis on. They feed it through a greenhouse that's behind the glazing on the equatorial side of the wall, and then the greenhouse is using it for irrigation. Then the soil profiles and the wicking bed sort of take the pathogens out, and then they capture it at the end, and they plumb that back into their toilet.
Yeah.
And they use the mechanics of the water there that's had the pathogens removed to flush a toilet. So I had to sort of do an analysis on that to see what the removal rate of the pathogens were. So when it goes back into the toilet, it's not aerosolizing pathogens and spreading them around the room. And which I could say that we found no pathogens in the water, but yeah, there's some conjecture about. Well, I have some questions to ask the Australian standards of where they got their grey water from. Because when you actually get really, really deep into stuff, when they say, oh, these are to the Australian standards, and when I read the literature and you like really drill down, and which is also a good skill to learn in university, you actually cut through a lot of the bullshit when people throw terminology and you're like, well, what is that? Well, what is that? What is that? Almost like a 5-year-old kid asking a million questions of why?
Yeah.
And you actually get down to it, I wasn't very satisfied with the bottom answer. I'm like, wait a minute, you've been using this as an authority way up here, and then you've been just swinging this around like some like club at people that they have to abide by this, and it's actually not that substantiated.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, it's bullshit.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't know if you've seen, speaking of like an example of that, one of Joe Rogan's newest podcasts is him and Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
And Joe's asking about the UFOs. And Neil deGrasse is like that too. He's like, well, when did they calibrate their radars? And when did they do this? And it just like, he's like, well, no, I need more information than someone saw something.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit if he's a fighter pilot. Like,
yeah.
You know, what the hell's going on here? What's further beyond that?
Yeah.
You know?
When I was writing my thesis, like the amount of research and reading you have to do to write it, and again, like this, if I can write a thesis, like fucking almost anyone can write a thesis.
Yeah.
And like, it's not because I'm smart or whatever. I reckon there's some mornings I'll spend about 6 hours and write like 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Just because you have to read so much, and then you have to figure out a pattern between what's just an anomaly and what's an actual substantiated pattern that you can kind of go, all right, cool. Well, the majority kind of agree that this trend exists. There are some like, and then you have to sort of say so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so were conflicting with this. But they did this, like they were testing this in this kind of study, and perhaps it produced results. So some of the things aren't kind of like concrete, but like, you know, UFOs exist. To be like, look, we believe this trend is like an established trend.
Yeah.
And if this happens, this is probably going to happen. So it's really hard to say this is this like completely black and white. You're very sort of statistic and this kind of stuff. And that's after hours and hours of work, and then the people who are also doing these researchers also do further readings and to govern their research and their research window. And they do like very fine measurements, very controlled. And if it's not controlled, you say like it's very transparent, very objective, which I found very, very refreshing, is that you can just get right down to the essential truths of things, which is a term they use called first principle reasoning. And such people really tout about this first principle reasoning, like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and that. So they're kind of like people with a physics or engineering background who have somehow found themselves out to be the entrepreneur and owner of things. Yeah. So they can, instead of being the businessman that makes a buck that employs the engineers to do the thing, and then the businessman's leading the bull by the nose. Yeah. The engineers are kind of like identifying patterns, and they're kind of doing the first principles reasoning to get that high efficiency out of their product.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. Fuck. Well, is there anything we haven't hit on?
Let me check my points.
Check.
Decompression time, done that. No,
this is where the host asks the guest for content. I'm like, what's written down?
Yeah, we did sort of touch on the incentive being sort of like victimizing yourself by nature. It's not sort of a preventative or... one skill I did identify that I picked up in uni was be able to constructively disagree and produce products, or produce a project. Because when I first went to the RSL, I kind of noticed that I saw it was an old guy thing, that you would go there and you talk to them, and they'd be like, "Oh, we don't actually talk to them anymore." And you're like, "Oh, okay." And then I kind of realized that some of our mates are doing it. And you're like, "Oh, we don't want to talk to each other." You said some things or done something, had a disagreement somewhere. And I'm like, I thought you guys were doing a project. And like, it was really good. Like, I had some good substance behind it. I wanted to get behind that. And and this happened. I'm like, you disagree on like 2% of the project, and now you don't talk to each other. Yeah. Which that ability to constructively disagree I found essential. That I would do things, and I would push things forward, and then you just put it into a pot, and then you just kind of have to go with the consensus of the group, and then trust everyone's backing. Everyone has a reason for it, and you produce a product, and then that's your product, and it has an element of you in it. Like, it could be 80% you, and but it's still like 60% someone else, and all these kind of things. So be able to work in that group and produce these things and remove your ego and emotion from what you're doing. I'd say it would be a significant and good learning curve for the veteran community and veteran. There's a lot of things that arise, a lot of emotions and things, and then you kind of like your logical mind kind of steps out of it a little bit, and then you find yourself disagreeing with good friends. Yeah, there's a lot in the community that's a community that's very ego driven, ego based, even down to like
well, no, fuck you, because you're a pogue. You know, that's it. Although, oh, this guy's done 10 tours and I've done Singo, but fuck that guy. Like, I had a story about that, man. One of my best mates, his dad, he's a brigadier, or was a brigadier. He marched in a Singo, man. Anyway, like pretty much does the march out, puts his beret on, and his dad's there in the full brigadier fucking get up, entourage and all, but they didn't know that was his old man. And this trainee just walks straight up to this guy and just goes, "Hey, fucking pogue." And all the secos and shit have just all they thought there was this brand new trainee has just called this brigadier a pogue. And I think they were like, oh my God, he took it literally. Silence. Like he took what we were telling them out in the field literally. Like, don't worry, it's my dad. It's like, what the fuck, man?
Whoa.
Epic.
Yeah.
He still does it, man. He's one of my best mates. He's now like a senior constable in Vicpol, and his dad's out. But like, if we go around to his parents' house, it's like, hey, Dad, you old fucking pogue. Like, what the fuck? This is just ego driven.
Yeah. My dad's in the Air Force Reserve.
Yeah.
And he had almost a very similar experience to me. He was a detective in the police and had disagreements with that. Yeah, very disgruntled about that kind of thing. And then went and did university and became a teacher.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, went to the Air Force, Air Force Reserve. So yeah, I rip on him all the time about being a pogue. Definitely not to that level. That's definitely some extreme.
Hectic,
probably one thing I would highlight, I think I touched on it a little bit, was the profitability of the misfortune of the veteran demographic. And I think there's some ex-service organisations that probably need to be more transparent about some of these things. And it's probably a simple economics thing. Is that even if you're not producing things, you need to be like producing the most effective solution. Otherwise, you're just consuming resources, and that's detrimental. And I think a lot of guys can realise that some things are outdated, all these kind of things. And maybe it's the ego thing pushing it forward, that they're like, no, it's my idea and this will be a good thing. And it's just kind of missing the mark. So with this whole Royal Commission coming up, I think it'd almost be worthwhile that they kind of go, all right, cool, well, there's a problem. And there's a lot of similarities between engineering and the army. Is that first thing in engineering, I like to say engineering is almost like the science of solving problems, is to understand the problem first. Yeah. And then get your definitions right. So hopefully this is one of them, that we're piling a lot of resources into this sector, or this sector or the veteran community is consuming resources. Yeah. And we've been doing it for a number of years and the problem's gotten worse. Like, where the hell have those resources been going? Yeah, exactly. And how they've been utilized. And they need to be fully transparent. And there'll probably be some embarrassing situations. Fucking oath. But I think that needs to be exposed so we can be like, all right, cool. Well, and if you can't measure it, you can't measure success, then it needs to be measured. Like, you need to know what's happening and the effectiveness of it. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you see like these ex-service say putting on like gala balls, putting all these things. I'm like, why are you celebrating? I'm like, I don't understand. Yeah. Well, they put on an event that caters to people. Like, oh, we're spending $100,000 to do this motorbike ride, and you're like, yeah, but that's two vets. Yeah. We're probably doing all right. Yeah. What about all these other fucking people? Yeah. That was, man, I don't know if you follow TPE memes or like Speargrass Collector. They put up, it's like the old lid life, man. They put up a meme when the Royal Commission got announced of like a guy just chucking paperwork into a fire, and it was like all the ESOs when they hear there's a Royal Commission. Yeah. And you're like, it's fucking true. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that sounds like it's not too far. Yeah. Like you look it up, and then some of the things they do at the end of financial year, they'll just have like 2/3 of their allocation of funding is just other, and you're like, other, and like they're like, it'll be taking in millions of dollars. Yeah. And like other, I'm like, gotta be more specific than that. Like, you got to say, oh, we took a grant and we used that grant to change the tires on the courtesy bus so guys can get home after getting pissed. And like, that needs to be reflected. Yeah. And there's some that are other profitable. Like guys are getting like business owners are just delivering services and buying like houses and that. Well, and it could be like, I don't know, the services are negligible. Oh, absolutely. And to be open and honest about, I think my last semester, like I went to DVA and I said, oh, I heard their sort of policies changed around higher education stuff. I'm like, well, I haven't kind of left yet. I like I'm still going. I got one more semester left, and like, okay, went through all these hoops, went through these things. I'm like, I just want help with that. And they're like, oh, we do all this like psychosocial stuff. I'm like, I don't need that shit.
Yeah, don't need it. Yeah,
I'm good. Thanks very much. Just like, how's this? And just jump through all these hoops, probably consume so much resources just in the administration of that. And they're like, okay, cool. Yep, there's that one semester paid for. Thanks very much. And I'm like, we need one semester. I'm like, what about the rest of it? And they're like, oh no, we can't backdate. Like that's yours to foot. You got to foot that bill. I'm like, what a waste of bloody time. I'm like, that administration probably would have paid for another 2 or 3 semesters.
Yeah.
And then had to like really wrestle myself away from like, I'm good now, like go away. I'm like, no, we want to keep providing your service. I'm like, I'm good. I'm like, there's much other people that could use your time than this. And they just wouldn't be on the book to like just rack it up and just be like, oh yeah, we've got, X number of veterans on this book, so we need to consume more funding. Yeah. I think I'm hoping this Royal Commission kind of like digs deep into this and just up things. Like, all right, cool. Well, here's a problem. Yeah, obviously it's a problem. We get the problem out on the board and be like, here's a solution we're going to do in the interim. And then we're like, what's the systemic thing that caused this problem? Like, how can we have a full objective review? What are some other countries that are doing it? Possibly like the small country in America. And America's policies don't actually hold a patch on what the Israelis do. The Israelis like smoke what the Americans do. But,
right.
But I wouldn't say that I feel as connected to them. They've got their own sort of world over there. But in terms of effectiveness, yeah, they're like Trump America, and like, don't mind the pun.
Yeah, yeah.
And America sort of like trumps whatever we do, and to take a risk on anything would be like good in anything, because I'm not sure how much worse we can get.
Yeah, fucking oath. I feel that. Yeah, some ESOs and some people shitting themselves, I think, at the moment. I hope they're shitting themselves.
Well, good. Yeah, I think some questions get asked and things get brought for the thing, and just because there's a problem like that's sort of embarrassing, I'd say it's good, because that's the first step to solving the problem. Yeah, you identify the problem, you sort of redefine what you say, how those metrics will modify themselves to be the solution. You're like, all right, cool, when we're in these particular metrics and they look like this, then the problem's solved. Yeah. And then you do the execution. Yeah. And you sort of develop your pathway to get there. And that's pretty much like engineering. It also is the first 3 letters of SMEAC. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like in finishing, if someone's serving or transitioned, what's sort of their first steps of getting involved, like with I guess like the veterans programs with uni? Like what do they do? Like contact DVA, fucking whatever? Or
so I'm not what DVA's policy is, but I would definitely hit them up. Yeah, I don't engage too much with the ESOs. I just do the direct like what I can deliver as a thing. So I've done those sort of, and I encourage all the other sort of mature type of students to acknowledge that it was kind of a difficult transition and just be there for the other guys, because a lot of the time they'll be saying, what's this? And like that 30-second conversation that's like changed my whole trajectory was more value than any other ESO can offer. So that's for the mature ones, and that's kind of we sort of bring that together as the student veteran group. But if you're looking to get into it, would be to engage them and to express interest in pursuing that. So if they don't do it, they're at least getting pushed in that direction, that they have want and desire, and that there's like a need to fill that hole. Alternative to that, so I know Flinders University do that MAP program, which is a good thing, which is completely free. I suppose you just Google Flinders University MAP program, or of those terms, something like that, and follow that bouncing ball down that road, and it was just a class full of veterans, so it'd be like between 50 and 30 at the time. So you'll be in a very, very similar group, but you'll be at university. So it's an incremental stage to getting to be a university student. You're not just like ripped out of the fence and you're just one dude by yourself in this thing. You're kind of like at university on the campus, but you're still in a cohort full of veterans. So it's kind of a weaning in process. And then we're still kind of there as that chapter where you've got a plethora of veterans at any stage going through it. And now we've got some like people coming out the other end. So they're all graduates, and they're either lawyers, like paramedics, psychologists, engineers. One dude's even doing like forensic chemistry or something.
Yeah,
some like real far out stuff. And it's just kind of like when you hear about these terms, you're kind of like, you're a digger, right? And it's like, yeah, it's digger. And they're like, yeah, now I'm one dude's doing his PhD in psychology. Yeah. yeah, as I said, psychology is pretty popular, and like the guys, yeah, kind of realize where they are, see what their friends are doing, so they take the on responsibility on themselves to get upskilled to help, which is like kind of more of what you want to be seeing and hearing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Well, is there anything in closing? We're at an hour and a half. I reckon we've done pretty well.
Shit, that flew by.
Yeah, fucking oath, it always does.
Yeah. Well, probably one new news is that Adelaide Uni have started up a chapter.
Right. And
I heard Uni SA are looking to posture to start a chapter. So that'll be all three in this getting conglomerate. It'd be good if we got like sort of industry kind of investment into it, and they weren't sort of like investing into other ex-service organisations that are producing nothing.
Yeah, fucking A.
But yeah, in the guys that are making and being proactive and producing things and coming out as the good news stories that you want to hear. And at the end of the day, they're just dudes like you and me, just like grassroots diggers, and they just kind of had this dream. And I would be the one that would want to support those guys who have taken it and taken the leap of faith and do it, and then just sort of incentivize and encourage others to do it. And that they're not just like defined by that chapter of service, and that they're almost empowered by it in such a way. And you come out with like, warts and all, but yeah, fuck, they're hard-earned words and they're good. But as I said, I kind of miss that sort of work ethic and some of the things to get things done. And they would only be an asset to whatever company they're a part of when they finish.
That's awesome, man. Easy. Well, thank you very much, and I hope people get something out of this if they're listening. And I'm sure I'll be able to answer some shit, or I'll contact you or whatever if anyone asks anything.
Well, that's why I'm here. I'm a bit more of an introvert about things, but I'll handle sounding like a flog for a little while just so it helps them. If other people get some value out of it, then I can wear that on the chin.
Oh man, I've got value out of it because I had no idea about because I've never considered study. Like when I was growing up, I was like, it's army, and when I was army, I'm like, that's shit. Fuck those pussies.
Yeah.
And then even now, I don't, with my diagnosis, it's like, I'm not going to go and study for 4 years if I've got 4.5 years to live. Fuck that shit.
Yeah.
So I'm but I'd put myself in a basket, but in a far extreme. But I hope and I was like, well, fuck, if I wasn't, going through this, I would more consider actually doing something. So yeah, no, man, thanks. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on and producing this platform.
Oh, fuck, anytime, man. It's just me shit talking and people apparently listening.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone actually gets this point, so if you got to here, congratulations. You put up with 2 fucking diggers.
Oh, yeah. I think, the more I've kind of been at uni, the more tangents I go on, so you're probably better off cut me off now. I can fucking talk.
Oh, that's right. We'll get the beers out and we'll go all night.
No worries.
Easy. Thanks, bro.